in-person seminar since February of 2020, maybe January 2020. I have to admit that when we got to invite Dr. Murzi, I often propose a list to Dr. Finelli and it comes back with some thumbs up. And he was someone whose scholarship I knew. And I'm really excited that this is really happening and that it's really happening in person. And that I'm getting to meet him in person.
Yes.
I will say again, if you just come in, there is a sign-up sheet that I'm hoping that you'll find before it leaves. We'll pass it around. And there's food over there. Feel free to grab it and sneak it surreptitiously during the presentation. And I will turn it over to Dr. Homero.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's really good to be in person, doing something outside my space. Let's see how it goes. It's been a while, so it's good to not paying attention to the computer. So today I want to talk about culturally relevant pedagogy, and I'm going to tell you why I love to talk about that. But I think I will start by sharing a little bit about my path and where I come from so you get a better sense. And I think this one is very formal. I will show you a different one that I have, but this is kind of my path. So I'm originally from Venezuela. I'm an industrial engineer, and I did that a lot there. I was in industry, then went into academia, then worked in a university. And then at some point I had to leave my country. I wasn't interested in doing that, but I had to for different reasons. And I came to the US on a Fulbright scholarship to do an MBA. I decided to change gears completely. So I did that. And then I decided, well, I'm going back to industry. And I did that as well. I work in human resources now. I was removed from engineering a little bit, which I think was good. And then I realized I'm missing my real life goal too much, that is being an academic. I didn't have a PhD at that point, though. So I decided, okay, I need to do a PhD. What should I do? Business, human resources, industrial engineering. And then I found engineering education at Virginia Tech. And I'm like, okay, that fits. That makes sense. And I did that. Then I moved to the University of Queensland in Australia because I wanted to be far, far away from Blacksburg, Virginia. And after a year and a half, somehow, I came back as a professor of practice, and then I moved into the tenure track, and I guess I'm staying forever in that time. I'm accepting that now. But about me, what I really want to share is, because I think it's really important in terms of the topic and some of the things that I want to talk today, is something that I call my intersectionality. And that's how some of my identities play in my life. And that's a picture of me and my family. Last time we had a family trip, 1 week because before they shut down New York City. We were there, and it's unreal to think about those days. So some of my aspects is that I'm an engineer. I feel like an engineer, and that's an important part of my life. I'm also indigenous. I'm from an indigenous community in Venezuela. And you will start seeing different colors there. So the blue means that part of my identity is usually part of a traditional majority, wherever I go. The yellow means that part of my identity is for sure not part of a dominant majority. So those intersections are interesting. I'm also cisgender straight, again, blue, part of a dominant majority. And then I'm an educator. And that one, you cannot tell, but it's supposed to be orange. And orange is something different as well. Orange means that part of my identity will fluctuate and change depending on the conversation. So if I'm in a room full of educators, I'm part of a majority. If I'm in a room full of engineers, not that much. And again, those interactions are interesting, and those interactions are important. Similarly, I'm an able person. I'm an international person, that's yellow. That's no discussion there. And then the other orange one that I have is that I'm a Latino Venezuelan, meaning that I live in Venezuela, and I identify as a Latino from Venezuela for many years. And then I had to move to a different country where I was exposed to this term minority. And that was interesting. So one part of my life that for many years was just what I was, and it was the normal, the rule, then became something different. And I started feeling different treatments and different things. And that was really interesting. And I think that shift really helped me understand this whole concept of privilege. Because when you lose that, you realize you had it. So again, bear with me, that's, I think, is an important part of the story. I want to recognize my people. That's my research group when we were doing some self-care during COVID. And yeah, we were trying to find creative ways to support one another. If you want to learn more about the research, I try to leave a slide there, and I'm going to share my slides with you. In case anyone is interested in any of those topics, let me know. I'm happy to connect with them. They are doing just really cool work all over the place. I also want to recognize my CRP team, including our very own Dr. James Hawley Jr. right here. We've been working for 2 years now, James, that's all. On this, doing different things around culturally relevant pedagogy. And I'm really excited about some of the things that we also plan to do in the near future. All right, but getting into it, I want you to think for a moment. What do we mean when we say culturally relevant pedagogy? What comes to mind? I want you to think for a moment, and then, of course, I want you to talk to someone sitting next to you. What do we mean by culturally relevant pedagogy? What comes to mind? And then hopefully we can share some of those.
Should I start talking?
Yes, please. You can start.
I thought I recognized him.
I want to say hi to you. Hi. So good to see you in person.
Part of culturally relevant pedagogy is
Like they're 4 years old and they get to 12 then and they don't know.
listening to where people or students are and teaching in ways that recognize that sort of like the tradition where you value culture.
Sorry, it's just I don't see each other in person because I remember your interview.
Culturally relevant pedagogy. Oh, I've never heard of it.
Right, I'm
This construct, it's creativity. Learning
The instructor, or I mean, even if you're teaching like a group of students, they're not going to be from a homogenous culture.
I got my degree here, and then I moved away, and then I did PR for about 6 months.
Yeah, you can teach in a way that, it would be great to teach in a way that addresses everybody individually, but
how do you dress?
how is that practical? I guess that's, how do you...
Okay, let's have, I want to be mindful of time, so let's have some reporting, some conversations. What were you discussing? What are some of the reactions to this? Yeah, what's your name?
Jennifer,
Jennifer.
we were talking about what it really takes to, well, first of all, we talked about knowing self, culturally, and then knowing the students.
Right.
And then what it takes to know students. And I was sharing how when I was TAing for psych, and I TA'd in psych 6 times, and I did another set of teaching as lecturer of record in our comprehensive studies bridge program. And it's interesting, the sense of accountability to really get to know the students and who you get to know. Like, say, for example, somebody's missing class a lot and you reach out to them,
Right.
and you find out the layers that you thought were there. It's even like tenfold
Right.
more intersecting factors.
Right.
And you've got 75 students.
Right.
And the ones that you most get to know are those who are frequent flyers, love coming to office hours to chat.
Right, right,
And then
right.
the ones that you reach out to.
Right.
So say my basketballer that missed class, my
Right,
footballer that missed class. So I go and spend time with them. But then there are the others in the middle,
Right.
and then your bandwidth to really get to
Right.
know everyone, because
Right.
your little survey that you do
Right.
at the beginning does not reveal all the
Mhm.
rich textures that you get
Right.
when you really spend that extra time in office
Right.
hours and extra office hours, and then telling the footballers, if you can't make it because of your schedule, let's meet on Saturday, and
Right.
you can't make it.
Right,
But you
right.
find out a lot. I mean, it's making my mind explode to think about
Right.
this, because it's like, have I done my due diligence?
Right, right.
It's something of spiritual proportions,
Right.
really. I'm sorry, I'm
No,
just
that's really good.
processing a lot.
And hopefully today you will get some sense of direction. Please remind me to talk, Jennifer, if I don't do it, about how we have done it with classes of 500 students,
Thank you.
because that's an important
Forward to
topic.
it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. What else? Any other thoughts or comments? Yeah.
Like in my experience, also when I think about this topic, is examples that get to every single culture
Right.
that is in the room.
Right.
Normally, you think about centers, actually mostly engineering, that
Right.
focus on a certain background of the students,
Right.
but you need to consider where everybody's coming
Yep,
from
yep.
and creating examples
Yep.
that fit to everybody.
Yep. That's a very powerful. What's your name? Daniel, that's a very powerful thing, and I have some examples. I will show you some examples because I think that's completely right. All right, let's take one more. Anything that we have not discussed that you talked with your peers? Robin.
I learned something from Rob. I did not know that in the literature, culturally relevant pedagogy includes an element of bringing students to critical consciousness.
Yes, that's a big part of that. Yep. That's really good. All right. But, well, I have the standard definitions come. In my opinion, two of the main people that are leaders in this work are Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings and Dr. Geneva Gay. And, I really like Dr. Gloria's approach of this idea of intersection of culture and teaching that we tend to not pay attention to, right? Especially in engineering classroom. It's like those two things are separate, right? But then, of course, it's everything that we can do in terms of how we address our classroom that consider intentionally the cultural perspectives and backgrounds of our students, all of our students, right? And we will be unpacking some of those things and some of the misconceptions that we have on those things. And again, Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, she discusses cultural competency. I like awareness more because, I've lived in 5 countries, 4 different continents. I still feel like I'm not culturally competent. So complex. But anyway, she says it's the ability to be firmly grounded in one's own culture of origin and fluent in at least another one. And by culture, I'm being very broad, right? That can be national culture, that can be race, ethnicity, that can be so many different things, right? But we need to start understanding and be intentional about that. So the first question that I always get is, so does that mean that we need to know all the cultures? Right? And a little bit back to Jennifer's stress about how can I know all the students? And I think that's the first misconception right there. It is not about learning all of them. It is about having the ability to create a learning environment where these differences are valued. So where they feel free to share, where they feel free to bring their full selves into the classroom. And that's a difference right there.
So I feel somewhat, I wouldn't say comforted, but reassured, because I feel like that's something that I've been able to do. But then when you see deeper needs and so on,
Right.
and you feel that pull to sort of, as soon as you notice, I've got to really
Right.
get the skull beneath the skin, so
Right.
to speak, borrowing from T.S. Eliot. And so it's like the accountabilities, how wide, how deep,
Right.
with these really thorny situations sometimes, to help the students work through these, although there's sources of referral and so forth.
Right.
One of the things is, because students love and trust you, they will come to you with certain things.
Right.
And it's hard sometimes to really
Right.
get these extra support,
Right.
get them to access these
Yeah.
things. So I was thinking about it in kind of this massive sense,
Yep,
apart from the classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and hopefully we get there, because that's the other part, right? We are not trained or prepared to provide all the support.
Right.
So that's important. But yeah, hopefully we will get closer to that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I also want to bring the why this is important, because I think a lot of times we spend a lot our time and focus and energy thinking about our research and the impact of research, which I think is fantastic and is great. But one thing that happens is that we don't talk enough about what happens in the classroom. And a lot of people do a PhD, they spend a lot of years investing in the research, and they are probably hired because of the research. And then the first thing they receive from the department head the first day on the job is, oh, by the way, go teach a class. And usually it's not related to your research, and you just need to go and do it. And then you will do whatever you receive in the other side of things. And usually what you receive is not that good, let's be honest. So the classroom is a crucial space, and from a learning perspective, we know that all the interactions that happen in the classroom has an influence on learning. We know that from theories of learning. And then because students are creators of knowledge and holders of knowledge, we need to bring that knowledge into the process, otherwise knowledge is just being partially formed. So what we want to do is try to minimize those barriers, but those barriers can really make a difference in these processes. And then I think by having these approaches, we start moving from deficit perspective more into asset-based perspective, meaning that the things that I bring because of my uniqueness and because of my cultural background are not something that should push me out of the system, are something that will get me farther away in the system, right? I was doing one of these for a math department the other day, and someone stood up and was not very happy and said, this is just rubbish. It was a British accent. Doesn't make sense for math. Math is objective and all that, right? And my response to them at that time was like, well, actually, I don't think that's true. Let's assume I go into your math class and I don't know anything about math, right? I'm a forced immigrant in the US. And because of that reality of my life, I have a lot of issues with authority, a lot, more than I care to accept. So if I go into your classroom and you tell me, good morning, 1 + 1 is 2, I would say, no way. And I will spend the next 4 months trying to prove you wrong. And then I will come back and say, okay, it was true. I accept it now. But I went through my process, because the way that I see the world matters in the way that I learn things. And it happens everywhere. We cannot separate ourselves from that. And I think that's why this is so important, because we're teaching all these complex topics, right? Especially in engineering. All right, let me give you a flavor of what some of the research says of how do we do it. Well, we spend time getting to know our students, like Jennifer was saying. Something that I found powerful is the pre-semester survey. You know, where I have one that I'm happy to share with you all. I asked them a lot of things. I mean, I asked them about the class. I asked them about some content that I want to know, but I also asked them about their favorite song. I asked them about where they are from, and I leave it open-ended on purpose. I asked them about, give me a fun fact or a boring fact, or give me something that you want to share with me. I asked them about what should I know about you when placing you in a team. I asked them a lot, but then I use that information intentionally. I do something with that. I spend some time doing something with that. And again, when I have 500 students, it's more tricky, but still, some things can happen. I'm getting there at some point. For example, one of the most powerful things, and it's so easy to do, playlists with all their favorite songs, playing when they get into the classroom. You have no idea how many students comment on that at the end of my semester evaluation. You can see their faces changing, the energy changing when they come into the room and they listen. Or getting really interested in a song that they never listened to before. And sometimes they ask me questions. And sometimes even students that share that song are happy to share a little bit about that musician or whatever. Connections start happening, things start happening. Another big aspect of this is understanding that not all students come from the same experiences. So for example, allowing first drafts where there is no grade attached to that experience is really important, because that really minimizes their fears on you and how are you going to grade and what are your expectations and how do you operate. So if you really take the time to do that and provide meaningful feedback where they understand what was expected, but is, again, not a high stake, it does have an impact on those students that have not had some educational experiences and really have no clue about what college is about. And then being careful with the language that you use in the examples that you provide, like Dan was saying, right? What about the examples? And I have some stories about that. So the first thing, when I went to Virginia Tech, I moved to Virginia Tech, the first conversation I had with a grad student, with a peer of mine, that now is my colleague, I was leaving a classroom and he told me, meet me at the GLC after the GSA meeting. I will talk to representatives from ISC and STS, but we can chat after that.
Too many TLAs.
What? Now I know that that's the Graduate Life Center, the Graduate Student Assembly, Industrial and Systems Engineering, Science Technology. I'm from ISC, I didn't know what ISC was. How many times do we do that in our classrooms? And this is my favorite one, and James knows this one. Let's do an exercise. Knock, knock. Broken pencil. Never mind, it's pointless. I know it's not good, I know that. Don't judge me on this part of my presentation. So when I moved to Philadelphia, my son was 3 years old. He went to school for the first time. One day I come back from my school, and my wife tells me, "Oh, the kid learned his first joke. He's really looking forward to tell the joke to you." I say, "Okay, that's cool." So I go into his room and he says, "Hey, Dad, I know a joke." I'm like, "Well, that's fantastic. Tell me." And he says, "Knock, knock." Look at him, and I say, "Oh, that's funny." And he starts crying, and I don't know what's going on. And my wife comes and says, "Oh, you are supposed to say who's there." Oh, how can I know that? Thank you very much. So I go back to his room. I say, "I'm really sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Can you tell the joke again?" He said, "Yeah, knock, knock, who's there? Broken pencil." And I say, "Oh, that's really funny." Because they didn't mind to tell me the entire process. Right? And I use this example because I feel like I'm a good father. I for sure know that I love my kid. I don't want to hurt him. That doesn't mean that my ignorance is more important than his pain. I am coming from a position of ignorance. He's coming from a position of pain. I cannot justify my actions based on my ignorance. So how many times are we making knock-knock jokes in our classrooms? How many times are we talking about football, assuming that everyone knows what football is? How many times are we using examples with things that are so embedded in our life experiences that we don't take a second to remove ourselves and really think, is this something that every single student will get? Or is this something that they all are going to get at the same level that was intended? And I think that's part of this work, right? I think that's part of that. Understanding and doing a little bit of reflection on what are the things that we take for granted. What are the things that we never think about, that are just automatic? And do a little bit of pause and exploration, right? So that leads to, let's do another brainstorming. And you can talk to the people sitting next to you, and I usually see the same patterns. Let's think about when you were a student, and that can go from, elementary school to currently, that's up to you. And think about your worst experience in the classroom. And if you want to share with people sitting next to you or close to you, please do. I understand that some experiences are so bad that we don't even want to share. But if you want to share with some people, please do. And then if you want to share with the entire room, that's also fantastic. I have a couple. So yeah, go ahead, have conversations.
I'm going to keep it quiet.
To the example I was reading about my
Okay, nice. In what lab or what department? Oh, okay, nice. Education research or? Okay.
My other
I was in school a while ago, but
I'm not gonna do it, but it was really hard. Not that you were.
Like that's a lot of people say.
I'm in aerospace.
I have a question.
A lot of aerospace.
For me, what comes up
like,
not even just you tend
Can be a bad, especially if you have like students from the Middle East or something like that could whose lives have been negatively impacted by that. So I'm not sure that's the worst example, but I think that's something that stands out.
I mean, I can write pretty
Bad practices experience.
I passed out of it, but I did take a look.
I had one, I almost dropped out of engineering. I had one professor, my grandfather died, and I missed the test because of his funeral, and he told me that's a life decision you made. No makeup test. So I had to get like a 98 in the final. I got 100, right, and I passed the class, but still, it's like, I don't want to be here.
This old white guy comes in with crazy eyebrows, and they're like, oh, they've got this image.
Yes,
I've gotta like diffuse,
Okay, let's have some conversations. And here, I ask people again, if they feel comfortable sharing, please do. If you don't feel comfortable sharing, you can at least share some of the patterns of this not so right situation. So, yeah, what do you have? Yeah.
So I'm Aaron. I'm in aerospace engineering, and something that I've sort of come to see as a bad practice is, well, in aerospace, a lot of the examples we give are military focused, just by virtue of our industry. And it was not, just being who I am, that wasn't a problem for me when I was a student, but I've come to realize that, we have students who, from the Middle East, right? Or something like that,
Right.
those examples resonate with them in a way that doesn't with people who are like me. So.
Thank you for sharing that. And there is another layer of complexity there. So I have a lot of mentors that are in aerospace, and for example, international students, they won't be allowed to get security clearance. They cannot do internships. They basically, it's a really complex situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll throw in here, James and I were discussing sort of common experiences that we had with faculty when we were students, and the faculty were really either purposefully or just part of their persona, they were propagating, I am so smart.
Right.
I am just so intent, and I am so smart, and we both felt intimidated in those circumstances to ask questions. They didn't say, hey, that was a stupid question, but you were just so overpowered by the personality that was a big issue. And then we got into a discussion of how different people are perceived in the classroom, right? How the students are going to perceive you on the basis of who you appear to be.
Right. Yep. That has been my experience all over, right? How many times have we seen this? Someone blah, 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 blah. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, moving on. Right? And then you ask them how the class, oh, class went great, they getting it. Yeah, I'm such a great educator. Yeah, what else? Yeah, what's your name?
Emma.
Emma.
And for me, I went to school outside of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came back to undergrad, I went to Penn State. And one of my classes were making a lot of football references,
Right.
As jokes. But football to me is like World Cup, so it's
You and
like
me both.
And so when they were making the references, I wasn't understanding, and then I just felt like I wasn't really a part of the class because everyone was laughing or everyone understood, everyone could simulate programs to relate to what the professor was talking about. But conceptually, it didn't make sense because I didn't have any ties to the commonalities that they were sharing.
Yeah, and you start, that was my experience all over, right? And you start second guessing yourself on everything because is it you or is it what is missing? Sometimes we are not able to identify what is missing and we think it's us. We can't, right? So thank you for sharing that. That's really good. Anything else? I think, oh, sorry, yes.
Oh, hi, I'm Tamara. This would maybe not be the worst, but I studied computer science in undergrad, and a lot of programming assignments were based around games, like card games or checkers, and even if the game is played in your culture, if you haven't played it, it's really hard to have the deep knowledge to do all of those assignments.
Yep. That is, I laugh and I shouldn't, but the other day I'm always invited to these panels on teaching, and one expert or renowned, someone that won a teaching award was there, and he's sharing best practices and say, oh, I do a bingo at the beginning of the class as an icebreaker, and I ask them, do you ask them if they know what a bingo is? Right. Oh, well, no, but fully support that. Yeah. So when we see these examples, and you had something, Jay? No, sorry. When we see these examples and when we think about these experiences, for some of us, those experiences are bad and we push through. For many, those experiences are bad and they leave. And they leave for the wrong reasons. And they feel like they left because they can't. And again, that's where I have issues. It's not because you can't. The other thing that we see about this is when we see a difference between what is a good experience and a bad experience, and when we think about our good teachers, because we do have some of those, it's not about the content. It never is. It's about having there a person that cares. And I think Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings says that in one of her papers. She said, this is just about being a good human. It's as simple as that. Right? Of course, it's not as simple as that, but it is about being a good human. It is about caring. It is about, the other thing is that when we go into the classroom, no matter the size, it can be 20 people, it can be, again, 500 people. Sometimes we don't know, because, again, we interact with all our students, we have these other roles that we need to fulfill, but in many occasions, we are the role model for at least one of those students, and we don't know. We are the person that they look forward to see every week. We are the person that they look forward to learn every week. And that's why when people ask, so how does one become culturally responsive? For me, it is a willingness to listen, a willingness to learn from your students, what they tell, what they bring, and what they show. If a student comes to you sharing about their life, I've seen many people, no, don't go there, I don't want to know about your dorm situation. They are doing that for a reason. That's intentional. We cannot dismiss that. We need to pay attention to that. It's a willingness to want to know more, but it's also a willingness to be prepared. We need to check our own experiences. We need to check our own biases. We really need to understand where we come from, because again, we also get too comfortable. We need to keep checking ourselves. It's really important. And then we need to understand how to be flexible, follow up, and follow through. And being flexible is something that it was really interesting to see happening during COVID-19, where we had these classes in place, and suddenly everyone is like, go teach online. One of my classes I wanted to do online for some time. They told me, you cannot do that class online. It's impossible. And next thing I know, please go do online, right? And I asked, do we get any support or preparation? Oh, well, there are technicians that can help you with Zoom crashing. Right. And 90% of people went there and they replicated the lecture on Zoom. And then they said, I had people telling our students, because now you have all this free time, and adding a couple of assignments. It was brutal. It was bad. So that's when you can understand that. So one thing that happened with my class that I found is really interesting, I'm going into research on that, is that when they took the class, when we decided to move online, I decided, okay, this is what I'm keeping, this is what I'm dropping. I don't care. This is what is the most important aspect of this class. The rest is noise. But then I realized, some of my colleagues told me, what happened? What did you do last time? I say, why? I say, well, I feel like this is the time that they are most prepared. Interesting. And what happened is that I decided to invest on them. And I told them, I'm dropping all these points because I care about you. I'm doing this intentionally. I just want you to be engaged. I just want you to learn this well. I don't want you to be overwhelmed and go and do check or go and do all these things that sometimes they do, right? Which is another aspect of the conversation that is really impressive. The other day I was invited to this panel. It was the honor system and all these important people talking about students cheating and using check and all that. And I know that's wrong, and I understand where that comes from. But I had to pose the question, what are we doing as instructors about it? Are we even taking a little bit of the blame on this? If I bore my students to death that they prefer to pay money for their homework, I kind of think that my homework might be wrong, that I can do better, that I can excite them into projects and activities and assignments. Maybe. They're literally using money to get away from my things. So, and again, it's not all good or bad, or I mean, there are a lot of complexity and things going into this, but it really takes some reflection for us to think more about these things. So let me share some examples, and then I really want to have enough time for conversation. And I want to share some of the things that I do and some of the impact that those things have had. And hopefully that will lead us to some other discussions. So for example, and I teach several classes. I usually teach Foundations of Engineering. That's a first year engineering class that happens. We have Foundations 1 and Foundations 2, happens in their first year. I have been very involved in that class. I also teach our global engineering class, and then I take them abroad. I was telling James and Robin that I took over in 2020, and then we didn't travel. But I still had to teach a class about traveling around the world. That was fun. I also teach contemporary pedagogy at the grad level and some other classes in our grad program. But anyway, this is something that I do especially with undergrads, right? I give them 2%, 3%, and this is called Tell Me Your Passion Project. And every time I give the floor for the first 5 minutes to people to just share their passion. And if they have common interests, I let them present. So I've been learning about some of them baking, playing instruments, skating, playing video games, or whatever they want. But what really happens there is that as they keep moving forward and sharing more, first they start sharing more and more and more. Then they start making connections with their peers. Then they start making connections with me, right? And sometimes they might come, look, I told you in my presentation at the beginning of the semester that I like to paint. Look what I just did. Like, oh, wow, that's fantastic. You know what I mean? We start creating those connections. It's all about setting the tone. It's all about setting an environment where they feel that they can be themselves. And that is value. Another thing that I do is tell me something I don't know. Beginning of class, tell me something I don't know. And you know, at the beginning they start Googling fun facts. And one of the most repeated one that is funny, they said, apparently if you hit your head to the wall, you burn some calories or something like that. I don't know where they bring those facts. And every semester someone will say that one for some reason. But what happens also is that as we keep moving forward in the semester, and that helps me understand where we are in terms of our learning community, is that they start sharing more relevant things about their life as we move forward. And sometimes they share, well, I come from this place where we do things like this. Or I celebrate this holiday and this is what we eat. And this is, some of our practices. And that really start bringing a different perspective to the classroom. I mean, students even start asking questions, oh, when do you do that? Oh, in March. Oh, nice. And is your entire family, or how do you? And, I'm removed. Knowledge is being created right there. So, it has an impact. This is one of my favorite ones because it happens every single time. So this is when we are in the second semester. This is a class about design. And we've been talking about design all over the place. So I said, okay, in your teams, you are the design team in my company. I'm the CEO and owner. We have this product that is very successful in the United States. We're leaders in the market here. And now I want to dominate North America. So we're going to be deploying to Canada and Mexico in the next couple of weeks. You need to make one improvement to this product. Would you have 2 minutes? Give me one improvement to this product. And this is the product. Something that especially kids use to reach the sink and drink water, right? And then sometimes they ask me questions about the materials and technical questions, which I share. So what do you think the improvements are? Or what improvements will you do, assuming you were the engineering teams working on this? Yeah.
I know plumbing varies across countries, so I make sure that it would actually fit.
Right. Size, adaptable size.
Yeah.
It's not something that comes up right away, but at some point it comes up. What else? Yeah.
I feel like it would also depend on what is the quality of the water there.
Oh, you are getting complex and difficult. Yeah. Sometimes we get there. Sometimes we get there. So yeah, you had something.
We're thinking about trying to sell and dominate the market. Different colors.
Yeah.
With, I don't know,
right.
prints, whatever.
That's the first thing they do. So the first go-to is color and shapes. Let's do an elephant or you know what I mean? Colors and shapes, that's the first thing. Then they get into sizes, adaptable sizes. Then they start getting into materials. Let's not do plastic, please. Right? They start thinking, okay. And then something really interesting happened. When we have international students on the team, they will bring quality of water. And then they will say, we need to implement a filter, right? But my favorite so far has been this team where one student said, I don't think we should sell in Mexico. And I say, why? She said, well, it's not safe. And then another team jumps in, right? Yeah, we thought about that. We know. That's why we are implementing a filter. And she says, well, no. Because you are teaching kids that it's okay to drink this water, and then they go to a different house where they don't have the device, and then they can get sick. So I won't feel comfortable doing this. Right there, we are developing socio-technical thinking, one of the most challenging tasks we have as educators of engineers, right? And it was fantastic. We had a long conversation, a long discussion about, understanding context and understanding problems before even trying to solve problems and all that. It was really good. Well, what really gets me on this is at the end of the class, she comes to me and she says, thank you for this activity. It was really good. I said, yeah, no problem. And then she says, this was the first time. We're talking about the end of the spring semester. It's almost a year. It was the first time my teammates realized I could bring something to the table. They realized my views were also important, and I felt for the first time recognized as a student. Wow. 1 year in college. Of course, I didn't do it with that intention, right? It's just an outcome that happens to be. I did think hardly, what can I use as an example that they will tend to overlook and start focusing on the product and not the context. Because that's our role, that's how we can do it, right? And then we promote those conversations. But this was an outcome that I was not expecting. And it's a reality. And she's doing great. She's from Ecuador and she's doing great. She graduated. She works for General Electric. She said she's going to be doing great things. But again, spent almost 1 year of college thinking, yeah, I'm useless here. This is something else that I did that I wanted to share. So one time I was teaching the same class, 2 sections back to back of this Foundations of Engineering class. And I decided, okay, I'm going to open up an anonymous survey I was teaching Monday and Wednesday. And I decided for one section, I'm going to ask them this anonymously every single Wednesday. And then for that same section, I will come on Monday and say, this is what you're saying. This is what I can do about it. What did you find helpful today? What did you find difficult? What should we change? And then I will come on Monday and say, well, you asked me to not have a project. That cannot happen, my friends. You asked me to move the deadline of that project 2 days. That can happen. You asked me to, they talk about everything, right? At the beginning, only 10 people, this is a 50 people class. 10 people are filling out this. When I start addressing things on Monday, I see that everyone is filling out the survey, right? They will be saying, the room is too cold. All right, I will try to manage the air conditioning. They will talk about everything. Sometimes related to class, sometimes not. Sometimes I can address those, sometimes I can't, and I'm explicit. I tell them, this is why I cannot change this, right? And then I was doing changes to both sections. The other section is just happening to be there. Right? They are not giving feedback. Sometimes I will come and say, hey, deadline is moved there. Thank you. That's it, right? And then one thing I did is I asked my GTAs to grade all the assignments anonymously. And we mixed things up. Right? I wanted to go through that process. And it was really interesting. These are some of the results of that experience. And I have a paper on that, and if you want to read it. The orange is this group that is providing feedback, and the blue is the other group. These are the students' perception of teaching at the end of the semester, right? And the blue is very consistent with my historical data in this class. The orange was different. I didn't need these results. I knew that. I could perceive the difference in the class. I see students very engaged, students just having a great time. And of course, we are educational researchers. I'm not implying any causality here. I'm very careful with the words that I use. I'm just saying this is something interesting that is worth exploring. But what really impressed me were the grades. Because again, we did random grading. Blue is aligned with the historical data from this class. Orange has been very, very above what we have in this class. And again, I'm not claiming anything. I'm just saying that it was interesting. If you were to ask me what I think about that, I feel like I was showing that I care. And that does have an impact on learning. But anyway, there are a lot of things that we can discuss from that. And I will probably come back to this. Yeah.
From this experiment, do you have other things that would indicate the orange group were more engaged?
I've been trying to find those, and I haven't been able to. Because again, I've been teaching this class for so long, and I kept asking them, like, are you doing, are you part of an extracurricular group? Do you meet outside class? Do you happen to know one another? Nothing. There was nothing that I could explain. But again, I'm not claiming anything yet. I just think it's interesting. I want to do it more intentionally and formally to see what's going on.
I was curious about the whole element of potentially metacognitive awareness.
Right.
There's some rich
Totally.
thinking about how they're learning that they even don't realize that they're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And part of the reason is because I am being transparent with my decisions. Mm-hmm. I come to class and I say, you told me to remove this project. This is what I cannot do it. This project is going to help you with this learning outcome. This project is going to help you in your future career with this and that and that. So I'm going through why I cannot make a decision. Again, I became very transparent with that class.
So the reasoning was laid out, and I think
right.
In some ways, students, especially when they know that you care, they begin to internalize that pattern of thinking and reasoning about the pieces and what you're offering them.
Right. And and the other aspect is they become self-directed learners, right? Like they feel like I own this process. I need to own it. Like I have that commitment, which is very different to other approaches. And I will show you another example that I have on that. Going back to some of the things that we know about the literature again, it is important that students fulfill academic needs and produce academic excellence. It's not about what they make them feel good. And I think that's a really good example and differentiation, right? Again, I'm not dropping the project. The project stays. You, by bringing your full self, will be able to do the project right and good and better, and you are not going to pay for the homework. One last example. I think I have one or two more. I've been doing this in my class as well. And it's been really interesting, but then I have some connections to education. So I tell the students, imagine that you live in a house and you have a lake in front of your house. And one day you walk outside and you see a dead fish in your lake. And I said, what questions do you ask? It's always about the fish, right? They always ask questions about the fish. What did the fish eat? What, it's, again, many questions about the fish. Imagine the fish is one student failing, and where are we placing the questions? On the student, right? Didn't study hard enough, and so many others. But then when I do with my students and I say, okay, now imagine that you go the next day to the lake and you see a bunch of fish. Now the questions and the focus move from the fish to the lake. And let's say the 5 surrounding neighborhoods also have lakes. And this is happening in all of them. So now it's about the groundwater system, right? And then of course I don't do this with my engineering students, this is more for you, but we do have conversations about the implications of where some of their thinking is coming from and why sometimes we try to dismiss some aspects of lived experiences of some of their peers, right? And some people that you share a learning community with. But of course, I always think about the having a different perception of how we think about our educational systems. And where should we be doing some hard questioning? What happens when some students are succeeding more than others? And we have all the trends and patterns, right? We have data showing that some groups are doing better. And I don't think it's on them all the time. More for Dr. Laxon-Billings. It's important that students, I told you this already, so my bad. This is from my friend James here. I think it's a really important closing. It's about what we have seen that instructors that take these methodologies and approaches to pedagogy have in common. So in terms of conceptions of self and others, they truly believe that the students are capable, that they are invested in students and they really trust the students. They trust them. And trust is important. I'm going to show you again a different example. They also saw their pedagogy as this art that is constantly evolving, right? We need to keep learning. It's a self-reflecting process as well. And again, going back to metacognition, we need to do our own metacognition of pedagogy and our practices and what we do and we say. But they also were part of the community, right? Back to your example, it's not that I'm the God that knows everything and I live. No. I'm here with you. We're going through this together. And I'm also learning. One of the most powerful things to say in a classroom is, I don't know. I really don't know. That's a fantastic question. And then we go and do our homework and come back and say, okay, this is what I learned. Or even better, let's stop the class right now. Let's all go to the internet and let's figure this out together. It's very powerful. In terms of social relations, those are very fluid. Students are engaging. You can see a difference in those ways of engagement. And it's a very connected community. So you really truly become a community of learners. And that happens. You can see it happening. It's really great when you see it happening over when the semester is moving forward. And then there is encouragement of being responsible for your own learning and then start becoming responsible for your peers' learning as well. So communal learning, which is really interesting. And finally, conceptions of knowledge, and I think I mentioned this early enough. Knowledge is not static, it's shared, it's recycled, it's constructed, must be viewed critically, like what Jennifer was saying initially, right? There is a lot of critical consciousness happening in these processes. And we sometimes just promote that space by allowing the students to bring these own experiences. Usually these teachers are passionate about teaching and learning, right? There is a factor to that. And then the last one that I don't have time to expand today, and I love one of my favorite topics, is assessment. Assessment needs to recognize all the multiple forms of excellence. And that's tricky, but it's, again, fascinating. All right, let me close and open for question. Going back to the point on trust, right? When I started doing these things in my first year engineering classes, I had someone, a senior person in my department, coming to me and say, you need to be careful. I say, what do you mean? And he says, when you start acting like that with first year students, they're going to take advantage of you. I say, okay, thank you. But it really, I don't know why that conversation impacted me so much. And I start second guessing myself. Am I doing this not right? Will I get in trouble? Is that the message? What's going on? Are the students missing out on something because of the way I behave in my classroom? I kept thinking about that. Then the following semester, after I had that conversation, I come to the class and I had this student named Mark. The first day in class, I said, hey, first year students, you can call me however you want. I can go by first name, Homero, if you feel comfortable. You can call me Dr. Murzi if you prefer that, Professor Murzi, however you want. And I see Mark raising his hand and say, yeah. So, well, I think that's very disrespectful. So disrespectful how? Well, that's disrespectful to the engineering profession. Say more? Well, I feel like we should be, demonstrating highest behaviors. I don't know what he said. I'm not comfortable with that. I said, okay, well, you can call me Dr. Murzi. For everyone else, please call me however you want. He didn't like that comment, right? And it was pretty obvious as I went forward in the semester that his views were very, very different to my views. That's okay. He helped me bring some very difficult conversations into the classroom, and that's something that I always enjoy. We push one another in a very interesting way, and I feel everyone was learning. It was experience. It was just experience. We have a program at Virginia Tech called Thank a Teacher program. At the end of the semester, students can submit a Thank a Teacher note. It can be anonymous, or you can put your name. And I almost fell off my chair when I see a letter from Mark. Mark is sending me a letter. Oh my, oh my. And then I see this. Thank you for being an amazing first year engineering teacher. That was the first, wow. Right? And then he goes and says, your professionalism and the mutual respect you have for your students goes a long way. And that's when it clicked. We are building trust. We're building a relationship where I care about you, and in return, you are engaged. In return, we care. And you see this relationship as mutual respect. I'm not treating them like the other professionals in the first year program when they make jokes about them. When they make jokes about curbing grades. When they make jokes when they all get 40s and 30s and whatever. No, it's different, right? And then he says, Foundation of Engineering was my favorite class this year, and I love the way, you gave every student the opportunity to earn the grade they want as long as they work for it. That was a lot of reinforcement right there. They got it. You will have a lot of chances here. You have a lot of opportunities to do things differently. You still need to work for that. And I think that's what it is, right? All right, that's all I have. Questions, comments, reactions. what else should we be doing? Yeah.
I have a question about, how people show up as human beings. So, like when you talk to fellow faculty about this, I mean, this speaks to a calling to be a better human being.
Right.
And some people may not want to be
Yep.
or not want to be
Yep.
immediately. We trust because
Yep.
we value human development, so we trust there's a seed
Yeah.
that something we say can meet and help to water and so on. Like when I said earlier, it's like a spiritual calling. And I've had several interviews recently where I've been asked questions and I said, yes, I could name a set of skills, but there's a way of being in the world. If I'm off campus and an undergraduate is sitting next to me in a cafe and I feel intuitively I need to say something, hey, what are you studying? I'm at UN too. Every time there is a way in which I can help that student. Now that's not for everybody, but that's how I feel like I need to be in this world.
Right.
And that's the only way that I can be in this world, whether it's on campus or off campus. So what is it that you do that can reach people in terms of this idea of actually becoming a more beautiful individual that serves all of us?
Yeah.
It creates an aesthetic, it creates a space that is desirable for us to live and work. So sometimes I get all the way up here, I get very passionate about it, but I'm just wondering in your communications with engineering faculty across different settings, how does that conversation go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do a lot of training. I do a lot of faculty development. And one of the things that I always tell them is one of the worst things that you can do in the classroom is trying to be someone that you're not. Right? Let's start by recognizing that. You need to find your teaching voice. You need to feel comfortable. And the best way to do that is to start by doing little things, right? Start trying one thing, start implementing one of these things and see how it goes. But then the good part is I always connect these things to learning. And I think that's what makes it different and easier for some of them to accept. Because you keep telling me your students are struggling. You keep telling me your students are not doing well. You keep telling me you wish your students did better. Well, let's try one thing and see what happens. Let's try one little thing and see if there is an impact. Every single time they will come back asking for more.
Okay.
Every single time. Like, oh, I did the pre-semester survey. That is amazing. They are different people. Yeah, I know. They are. Well, they are not different people. You are different now.
Right.
They see you as someone different now. Right. What else can I do? Let's do PBL, and we go and do PBL, right? And we go crazy, and But it takes time, but connecting it to learning, because it does have an impact on learning, I think is a good strategy.
And then they begin to feel differently about themselves.
Right. Well, that part I don't know, but but they do see different interactions in the classroom. Yeah.
Thank
you.
You.
So kind of along the same line, but I guess far more probably on the pragmatic side.
Right.
You talk about culture, and you talk about flexibility.
Right.
And you're working with faculty members who don't show up and feel like I need to be a great human being.
Right.
Who show up and feel like I have a curriculum.
Right.
I'm here to teach it.
Right.
I guess my comment/question is, I've run into a lot of faculty when you bring up the word culture.
Right.
Their immediate response is, I don't have any culture.
Right.
And then we have a conversation about
Right.
I'm like, wait, you're an engineer.
Right.
You were just talking about using compasses and drawing on drafting boards. That's a culture.
Right.
So when you engage faculty who don't feel like they want to be necessarily a good human being,
Right.
feel like they lack culture and they lack flexibility. And I think one thing you mentioned, this idea of showing up as yourself, talking about being authentic.
Right.
How do you support that kind of faculty member?
Right.
Who can still be successful in doing this, but it may look different.
Right. That's the tricky part, right? And I think that's where we, there are several layers to this. That's where we, that's probably part of the reason why we are not doing more, to be honest, right? And that's what I feel like there has to be work on the system as well, right? If you start valuing the right things, these conversations start happening, right? That's why we need investment from administration. We need investment from department heads. Because that's another reality. I have had instructors come in and say, I really enjoyed this. I see the value. I don't look like a person that can have these conversations in the classroom. What do I do, right? And we unpack those things, right? And we go, and they say, what if I do something that the students don't like, right? And that might happen. That's a reality. And then I get bad evaluations in my entire career. You know what I mean? So that's why I really think that there has to be conversations happening at different levels. We at ACEE right now just received a call for some institutions. They want us to supervise some or provide suggestions on some language, but some institutions are including, for example, inclusion and diversity statement as part of the tenure process. So you need to submit your dossier that has an inclusion there, right? So then, as an institution, you are saying, I place value in these things, right? I have had department heads saying, this semester, we are not taking into account student evaluations because we're going to, one time I did a radicalization of senior design class. And my department head was invested and said, no student evaluations, or, I mean, we can have them, but I'm not counting this for any promotion and tenure, right? So there is that value that helps. I think or at least the way I see that I can do is just keep sharing the message, keep sharing some strategies, but it won't happen until the system is in our side, right? Until we see more people invested in this, until we start criticizing curriculum, right? Robin and I were talking earlier. Some students cannot even go abroad because they don't have the space. They need to take the 1,212 credits and learn about all the things that need to be learned to become an engineer, right? That's not a reality. I work in industry kind of recently, and they need some technical skills, but they really need some critical thinking and know how to learn. I think that's the most important skills, not what questions to ask. Anyway, I'm going sideways, but I think there is a need to focus on systems, curriculum, start pushing our practices and start pushing what we value. Because if you tell me that what I value from your teaching is your student evaluation, I've seen instructors bringing donuts. Students like them. It's such a weird thing. Because can you not make them like you because of who you are? I'm not going there. Anyway, I think we need to have those conversations as well.
One quick question. Speaking of systems, have you looked at doing this at the grad level? Because a lot of us are just repeating our own experiences with our advisors and training as graduate students.
Yeah, we're doing a couple of different things on that. Well, the class that I teach is called Contemporary Pedagogy, and I'm not letting that class go intentionally because I get 60, it's a class that is supposed to be for 10 grad students. I get 60 and 20 in a waiting list every single semester. Because that's the only place where we have these conversations. And they say, I want to be a good engineering faculty member. I've been spending my entire 5 years here doing robotics research. I don't know how to interact with the students. This is the only place where we have those conversations, right? So right now I have a proposal for the college to actually create a larger center. And we did that with another space. So we created a class called Graduate Student Success in Multicultural Environments. And it went from a pilot to be a mandatory class for every graduate students in the College of Engineering. And we teach them about interactions with advisors, interactions with peers. And we really push them to think about where some of their beliefs are coming from. But we started small, right? We did one pilot with 20 students. They loved it. The other thing that we have done that has been successful is we start writing about those things. And we start publishing around those things and maybe even applying for grants around those things. Because guess what? Then they think it's important. They're bringing money for this. Now it's important. But it's an ongoing conversation. I feel like we're going in the right direction. But I crucially think that the graduate space is the most important one. Because again, they are the ones that are going to go into the classroom and they have a choice. Do I repeat what they did to me? Or can I learn a better way? But that's not part of the formal curriculum. They need to go and find that information. Yeah?
Earlier in your presentation, you were talking about what we can do to include, or what people can do to include CRT. And you mentioned how one of the things that happened was that at the end of the course, people were learning about each other.
Yeah.
And about their different cultures and backgrounds. So my question is, do you ask these questions about their passions or tell me something you don't know in order to promote knowledge? Or are you doing it to try and connect them to the course material? And if it's the latter, the course, a semester is only so long, especially because this is higher education. Right. And if they start opening up at the end of the semester, have they actually connected whatever they're learning to the material?
Yep, that's a really, really good question. Yes, I do. So what happens, they keep sharing the passion project. They keep sharing. In one of the last weeks of the semester, I have a session that the entire session is, okay, get into teams. They go into teams. And I say, okay, try to think about one of the presentations on your passion projects and connect that to engineering. And we do an in-class activity where they first need to try to remember what some of their peers were saying, discuss as a team some of their passion, and then intentionally make the connection to engineering. And I don't do it thinking on the product or the outcome of that. I do it thinking about helping them make connections and go through that process. I don't care what they're going to say. I don't care how they connect skateboard to engineering. They can say whatever they want. For me, what has value is the way that they think about it and the process they go through to make that connection. But that's a really important question.
All right, let's thank Dr. Murzi.
Homero.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. It was great. Thank you.
Really appreciate all you coming too. And there's a lot of food left over. Feel free to take something with you.
Hey. Sí, claro.
I was looking at Monday and I was like, I know I'm forgetting someone, and I didn't even because I looked at Michigan and I didn't even your name. I might have glanced through it then, or just didn't look at the right spot. Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like,
¿De dónde? Yo estuve así en Los Ángeles. ¿En industrial? No puede ser. A mí me estaba reclutando Catalina, Ramírez y Camilo. Sí, qué casualidad.
Like the one you take in high school, most of the people find it like university machine or whatever. I don't know. It's very weird. So I didn't originally see your name. So you might have like done a different one or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I control F on it.
Yeah, correct. But I'm like, got it.
Claro.
Yeah, you do. It usually goes pretty well.
Yeah, for sure.
Now we got somebody coming out of town.
No, y toma tiempo. No, es que es difícil. Toma tiempo adaptarse. A ver, son muchas capas a eso.
Less effort that way. I don't know, I'm like, we can also go Star Wars. And they're gonna talk about engineering. What's yours? Yeah, we're doing it with the Black Film Society.
You know Aaron then?
Aaron was
The professor. Okay, yeah, we're in a class.
You guys should definitely come up. I'll send you the link.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I took some pictures thinking that I would feed them to these tweets. It's cute. It's not like it. Look good.
I just know when you keep it up.
I like the color though.
So, would you guys like to hang out?